Hello, and welcome to the first episode of the History of the Gosford Musical Society. My name is Darryl Davis, and I have the honor of presenting a number of outlines of GMS through narration, and I've got my notes, which I'll have every time, and of course, importantly, through photographs. Now, my first involvement with GMS was in 1981 in a show called South Pacific, and since then have been involved on stage in over 50 shows here with GMS. I've also directed 15 musicals, Singing in the Rain, Sound of Music, and 6 months ago, Les Miserables. Now, as a history teacher, I love to see memories preserved. Otherwise, we lose our historical, background. In 1997, GMS celebrated 50 years of productions. And I went to a big celebration at the Central Coast Leagues Club, packed with people, particularly loved and was enthralled by the stories of those that were involved in the 1940s and 50s. And I thought from that time, I've got to start collecting these, material, interview people. And so I've done that and put it together in a digital history of our society. Now, the creation of the Gosford Musical and Dramatic Society, and that was the original name. The Dramatic Society was also in that GMS name at that time. This is when a band of, and I call them very intrepid, progressive people, decided that, hey, with a population of 16,000 in Gosford, we have to have some drama here. In other words, we want to participate, plus we want to do something that the community can come and watch. Amongst their aims was that one, but also to build what they called a theatrical bowl, which is really 1940s speak for a theater, which was realized in 1988 with the creation of the magnificent Laycock Street Bicentennial Community Theater, which I will talk about at some other episode. Now, the new society decided to put on plays, as I said, and musicals, and the very first musical that they picked was The Pirates of Penzance, which we have done 4 times altogether in our history. In fact, I directed the last one in 2015, and it's still as funny as ever. Well, the first home that they came across was the Valencia Picture Theatre, where they were there from 1948 until 1960. Now, the Valencia was built in 1927, and by 1947, it was known as the Flea Bag. It's right across, it was on Man Street, basically across from the railway station. Now, let's give you some idea of where it was from that picture. The Valencia there is on the left, and you will see the railway station is actually just across the street. I believe that this picture was probably taken around the early 1930s by looking at those cars there. Now, the Valencia had to compete with this Art Deco theater called the Regal, and it was built in 1937. It was not there anymore, of course, but it was a real, beautiful spot back in the 1930s and 40s. Now, today, if we went to look for the Valencia Theatre, that's what you'd see. Again, across from the railway station, and it's just next to the Gosford Hotel. In fact, there's an arcade there that I still think bears the name the Valencia Arcade. Now, if we have a look at this theater, in the inside, it would have seats for 900 people. Now, it's funny because I used to ask some of these old-timers, how many people did it seat? And I got everything from 400 to 5,000. I found a newspaper article written in the 1950s, and they said it was a 900-seater, and it had a fire there. And so I think they were pretty right on that time, at that period. Now, to give you some idea, 900 seats, the magnificent Laycock Street seats around 400. I think it's 394. So you'll see the difficulties that they had in this 900-seater as I go through it today. Now, the orchestra sat in front of the actors there. And I want you to have a look at the depth of that stage. It was made for a picture theater, not for a musical. So that presented an amazing amount of problems if you had a large cast, which most of these early shows actually did. Now, I want you to imagine the actors on there had to sing over the orchestra and reach 900 people in that theater, and they had no microphones. So these singers had to be able to enunciate and by far had to project. And this is even true of Broadway before they had microphones. And that's why you see people like Ethel Merman, who the old-timers will know Ethel Merman was, there's no business like show business. You know, she had a booming voice. And because of that, she was hired a lot. Well, the actual theater then had I'll go back to there, had a small stage, as you can see here. And they only had one backdrop. That was it. And I asked people, where did you change your costumes? And apparently the ladies used to change behind that backdrop, which probably was not much more than a meter in depth. And so I would imagine that quite often that backdrop would have been shaken back and forth because of that. And I asked the guys, where did you change? Oh, well, we had a marquee. Out the door was a grassed area. And we used to change there into the marquee, which I think probably was really just a tarpaulin. And I said to them, what happened when it rained? Well, we got wet and we dragged mud in on the stage. So really, they were doing it pretty tough back then. Now, there's a story that I've actually written here that's called The Disaster, it's a disaster, the case of the flying curtain. You see, the large front of house curtain had been attached to a fence post, which by 1950 suffered wood rot. Now, what had happened is they actually had a rope coming in from outside through the window, and it was up to the curtain and attached on the outside on this fence post. But during a highly memorial performance, the fence gave way and the curtain came crashing down on the orchestra. Now, apparently, the MD, Ted Instone, did not miss a beat. He kept flailing his arms around trying to get that tempo faster and faster to get the scene over as quickly as possible. So that was a very interesting story. Now, as I said, only had one backdrop, and the shows, they would put on a musical, they would run for 4 performances. And this was one of the big ones they had. Those that know Kevin Booth, who's celebrating his 90th birthday this year, he is there on the left-hand side, and he's pretending to steer the ship. He began in 1948 when the first production was on, and he's still the patron of the society today. Lighting was at a premium in those days, and they didn't have very good lighting at all. In fact, I wish I could tell you about the acid bucket that they had to move the pole up and down to get the light intensity. If I knew more about it, I would tell you that. But it was a very primitive way to light, not like we have today, of course. Now, if we have a look at the programs, most of the early programs were this sort of design. They set you back a whole 10 cents, by the way. And I have collected every program that the Society's done. I have over 200 programs, which people given to me or I've found in various archives. We have here in the middle of the program, they used to always have the actors, and certainly even like today, have down all the songs and the scenes. And if you have a look at that program there was a huge cast on that tiny stage. You know, that's just remarkable that they could do that. Now, this is an interesting insert. I love this one. This came out of a 1954 program. And it says, preliminary rehearsals of Bob's Your Uncle, our next musical, which it wasn't, they didn't put it on, is now underway. Also, the theater has been booked for another mammoth Christmas pantomime, which they used to do every year. But I love this bit. Can you dance, sing, speak, or just look pretty? Anyway, come along and add to the show. Could you imagine seeing that in a program today? Whoa, that would be fascinating. Now, they also had in the inserts a lot of ads. And this is an ad from the A.E. Eagle and Sons, who were the main sponsors of the society in the 1950s. And have a look at that modern-looking truck. That's a beauty, isn't it? Well, costumes and sets were all rented, and they came from J.C. Williamson in Sydney. Now, when I look at these costumes, I mean, they're not real flash, not really. You look on the left-hand side, they're not too bad, but on the right-hand side, oh boy. It looks like the guy's wearing a dress for a start. Some pirate. Anyhow, I want you to think about comparing that to the last time we did Pirates. That's what the costumes look like. So we've come a long way in over 70 years, really, with that. Now, one of the things about the sets, they were also all rented, and they came from Sydney. And in the insert, which had been done for this, the show was called Hong Kong. I'm sure it's only ever been done once here in Gosford, 1949. And they printed and put in the program one sheet that said, owing to the set not arriving from Sydney on time, Act 2 is going to look a lot like Act 1. So I thought that was pretty clever, actually. Well, they also had at halftime, intermission, they had piano or organ recitals. And the guy that used to play for the theater, for the films, also was hired to come and play. And in fact, he became so popular that he was voted in as vice president for 1 year. I thought that was pretty interesting. Well, the directors were all imported, basically. They came from Sydney. And this is a photograph of a publicity shot in 1952, right down at the man with the bow tie. His name was Neil Johnson. And he also directed 15 shows for GMS. Except for, unlike me, he got put up at the hotel. Not bad. And in that time, too, there was only ever one professional actor that was paid. We have since had other professional actors, but they become, like everybody else, they donate their time for the society. The rehearsal period time for the shows back then was very short often. Like they would rehearse maybe for 2 months. Today we rehearse probably 4 months for a production. And they used to enter competitions, like Stedfords are today. Well, they called them festival shows. And so the people that did plays often entered into these competitions. And I got to tell you, they had a lot of critics. I'll give you an example, a couple of examples. In 1951 review of the show called Our Miss Gibbs, the Gosford Times said this: "The Duchess's daughter was well cast, physically, but she, in common with most of the other actors, spoke her lines poorly, although she redeemed herself with a few good songs." That's pretty tough. In this particular article, it says, "Noel Coward Farce showed hasty job of production." You wouldn't want to see that. But one of the things in the middle here basically says, talking about an actress, "This actress has so much to say, so vital to the plot, that the monotony of her high-pitched voice was painful." Ouch. Television, of course, came about and destroyed the Valencia Theatre. People didn't go to the pictures anymore. And so the society went to places like the Masonic Hall or the Progress Hall in East Gosford. They needed to find a home. And finally, in 1965, a new permanent GMS home was found. The building with the majestic name, the Dwyer Pavilion. And I'll be covering that in a future episode. Thank you.